The courtroom was cold. Not because of the air conditioning, but because of the way everyone looked at her. Ava James stood there, 15 years old, hands trembling slightly, her school uniform wrinkled from being held in a holding cell overnight. She hadn't said a word yet. Because no one had let her. The bailiff avoided her eyes. The public defender hadn't even bothered to show. And the judge? Judge Linda McKinley adjusted her glasses, glanced down at the case file, and scoffed. Shoplifting, she said flatly. From Nordstrom. Not exactly subtle, are we? A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ava's lips parted. I didn't. The gavel slammed. I'll speak when I'm done, Miss James, the judge snapped. From the gallery, 2 older women shook their heads disapprovingly. A man in a suit whispered something into his colleague's ear, both watching Ava like she was a criminal. No one asked her what happened. No one asked if she was scared. They just saw her skin. Saw her braids. Saw her alone. And assumed. Judge McKinley leaned back in her chair. You were found with the stolen item in your bag. The store manager confirmed it. Case seems open and shut. It wasn't mine, Ava said, voice steadier this time. I didn't put it there, someone else. Oh, of course, the judge said, eyes narrowing. Someone else did it. How original. A slow smirk crept across her face. She turned to the bailiff. And where's this mystery person then? Did they vanish into thin air? The courtroom chuckled. But Ava didn't laugh. She just stared at the judge. Calm. Focused. Almost too calm. Judge McKinley didn't like that. She leaned forward again. I've seen your type, she said, tapping the case folder. Entitled. Disrespectful. Think the world owes you something. She paused. But let me be clear, this courtroom doesn't. That was when something strange happened. A flicker, barely visible, passed across Ava's face. She reached for her backpack on the floor. Slowly. Calmly. Judge McKinley raised a brow. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I'm just getting my phone, Ava replied, unfazed. I have one call, right? The judge snorted. This isn't TV, sweetheart. You're not in a crime show. But Ava already had the phone in her hand. And she was dialing. Every movement was deliberate. Like she wasn't panicking, but planning. One of the officers stepped forward, cautious. Miss, you can't make calls without. It's on speaker, Ava interrupted. The line rang once. Twice. Then clicked. A man's voice answered. Calm. Measured. Powerful. This is Charles James, United States Attorney General. Who am I speaking with? The room froze. You could hear a pin drop. The judge blinked. What? Ava looked up. Directly at her. Hi, Daddy. I'm in court. The judge won't let me speak. A full 5 seconds of silence. Then, I'm on my way, he said. And hung up. No one spoke. Not the bailiff. Not the clerk. Not even Judge McKinley. But Ava? She just put her phone back in her bag. Sat down. And waited. Because now, the real trial was about to begin. Judge McKinley gripped the arms of her chair. Hard. The entire courtroom was still stunned by what they'd just heard. The U.S. Attorney General. That wasn't some bluff. That voice, that name, it was real. But the judge recovered quickly. Too quickly. She cleared her throat, trying to sound composed. Let the record show that the defendant has made an unauthorized call in my courtroom. Ava didn't flinch. Didn't blink. She simply looked ahead, silent, steady, like she knew exactly what was coming. Judge McKinley shifted uncomfortably, then turned to the bailiff. Place the phone in evidence. And get her public defender in here. Now. The bailiff hesitated. Your Honor, I think we should maybe. I said now, she snapped. The man stepped back. From the back row, a woman in a denim jacket whispered. Did she say her dad was the Attorney General? Her friend elbowed her sharply, eyes wide. In the silence, the door opened. A tall man in a wrinkled suit rushed in, papers spilling from his briefcase. "Sorry I'm late," he panted. "I had traffic." Judge McKinley rolled her eyes. "Perfect timing, Mr. Kendall. Your client is currently on trial for felony theft, and just tried to intimidate the court with a phone call to the Department of Justice." The lawyer blinked. What?" Ava turned to him. "You're my lawyer?" He nodded sheepishly. "Yes, court appointed." She looked him up and down. "Do you even know my name?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. She turned away. Judge McKinley leaned forward again. "Miss James, regardless of who your father is, this court doesn't take kindly to threats or theatrics." "There was no threat," Ava replied. "Just a phone call." "And what exactly did you expect that phone call to do?" the judge snapped. "Erase the evidence? Make me forget you were caught on camera with the merchandise in your bag?" "There is no footage of me stealing anything," Ava said. "Oh, I'm sure," the judge muttered. "Let me guess, everyone else is lying. The security officer, the store manager, the customer who claimed you were acting suspicious." Ava glanced at the crowd. A middle-aged woman in a Nordstrom blazer sat stiffly, lips pursed. That was her. Ms. Elaine Trent. The store manager. The one who'd followed Ava through the store. Watched her from 2 aisles away. Waited until she was out of view, then claimed she saw Ava hide a silk blouse in her bag. But Ava hadn't touched anything. No one had bothered to check. Judge McKinley turned toward Ms. Trent. "Are you willing to testify?" Ms. Trent stood. "Absolutely. I saw her with my own eyes. She was stuffing merchandise into her backpack. She looked nervous." "Nervous?" Ava repeated. Ms. Trent hesitated. "I mean, she looked like she didn't belong." There it was. Not even subtle. She didn't belong. Judge McKinley nodded. "Thank you, Miss Trent. We'll proceed to sentencing." "What?" Ava's voice cut in. "I've heard enough. You haven't even let me explain." "Because the facts are simple," the judge barked. "You were seen. You were caught. And now you're wasting my time." Ava stood. "So this is how justice works in here? You just believe the white lady in the suit and ignore everything else?" The courtroom tensed. The judge's eyes narrowed. "You're on very thin ice, young lady." "I've been on thin ice my whole life," Ava said. "Doesn't mean I'm gonna fall through." Judge McKinley rose from her chair. "I'm remanding you to juvenile detention pending review. Bail is denied." Gasps rippled through the room. Ava stood frozen. But then, the courtroom doors opened. Fast. And in stepped a man in a dark suit. Tall. Composed. Surrounded by 2 federal agents. Charles James. He didn't speak. Not yet. But his presence filled the room like thunder. The judge blinked. "Excuse me, this is a closed proceeding," she said, voice shaking ever so slightly. Mr. James held up a badge. "Department of Justice. Cabinet level. Attorney General of the United States." He finally spoke. "Then I'm opening it." The entire courtroom held its breath. No one moved. No one blinked. Because when the U.S. Attorney General walks into a courtroom, especially unannounced, things change. But Judge McKinley didn't sit down. She clutched her gavel tighter. Raised her chin. "This is highly irregular," she snapped. "Mr. James, or whoever you think you are, this is a state court. You have no jurisdiction here." Charles James didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I'm not here to exercise jurisdiction," he said calmly. "I'm here as a father." He walked to the front, slowly. Eyes never leaving the judge's. "And I'd like to know why my daughter was denied representation. Why she was processed without parental contact. Why she was silenced while the court moved to sentencing, without hearing a word from her defense." The judge's face flushed. "We followed protocol," Your protocol, Charles said, seems to violate at least 3 federal guidelines for juvenile processing and 2 civil rights statutes. Murmurs broke out. Even the stenographer paused her typing. But Judge McKinley wasn't backing down. I don't care who you are, she said. In this courtroom, I'm the authority. Your daughter was caught with stolen goods. That's not my fault. That's not race. That's not bias. That's criminal behavior. Ava stood now. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. I didn't steal anything. Then how did it get into your bag? The judge demanded. Charles answered for her. That's what I'd like to find out. Because the security footage doesn't show her placing anything in her bag. The judge blinked. What? I obtained it this morning. Since no one here seemed interested in pulling the tapes. He turned to the bailiff and handed over a USB drive. Full footage. From all 3 angles. The courtroom stirred. Miss Trent suddenly looked uncomfortable in her seat. Judge McKinley snatched the USB from the bailiff and motioned to the clerk. Play it. Now. The screen behind the bench flickered to life. Everyone turned. Ava walking through the store. Calm. Browsing. Then she set her backpack down by a chair to try on a sweater. Walked away for a moment. Enter another girl. Blonde. Ponytail. Dressed similarly. She passed Ava's unattended bag. Paused. Looked around. And quickly slipped a blouse inside. Gasps erupted. It wasn't Ava. She'd been framed. The girl on the video was long gone before security ever approached Ava. Judge McKinley sat frozen, her face pale. The silence was crushing. Charles folded his arms. So, you were saying? But McKinley wasn't ready to give up. She straightened her robe, ignoring the screen behind her. There may have been a misunderstanding. But this still doesn't excuse her behavior in court. The outburst. The phone call. The disrespect. Disrespect? Charles interrupted. He took a step closer. You denied her counsel. You denied her voice. You moved to detain a minor without due process. And now, when faced with the truth, you call her disrespectful? His voice didn't rise. But it struck like lightning. Judge McKinley's lip twitched. You can't come in here and lecture me about my courtroom. No, he said. But I can file a federal review. And request an investigation into judicial misconduct. The room fell silent again. The judge looked at Ava. The girl she just tried to sentence to juvenile detention. And for the first time, she looked afraid. You think you can scare me? She whispered. Charles shook his head. No. I think your own actions already did. But then... Her voice turned cold. Sharper. Desperate. Well, guess what? I can remand her. Evidence or not. I can call it obstruction. Contempt. I can still. That's enough, said another voice. From the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. Another woman had entered. Black suit. Federal badge. DOJ insignia. Inspector General Marla Young. I've heard enough, she said again. We've had complaints about this courtroom for months. We were just waiting for a case egregious enough to justify a formal inquiry. She walked down the aisle, her voice like ice. And this one? This was it. Judge McKinley stared at her. You can't do this. But her words were hollow. The Inspector General reached into her coat and placed a document on the bench. Effective immediately, you are being placed under investigation for judicial misconduct, racial bias, and violation of juvenile due process. You are to step down from the bench until further notice. Gasps. Applause. A few claps from the gallery turned into a small standing ovation. Ava didn't move. She just stared at the judge. Not with anger. Not with revenge. But with the calm of someone who knew. She had just won. Judge McKinley stood frozen behind the bench. The black robe that once gave her power now felt like a costume. like armor made of paper. She glanced down at the document in front of her. Immediate suspension pending federal review. No room for argument. No room for delay. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. From the side of the room, the bailiff cleared his throat, then stepped forward, slowly, hesitantly, and took the gavel from her hand. Protocol. She didn't fight it. Didn't even protest. Because she knew. The courtroom door remained open behind Inspector Young as two federal observers entered. Quiet. Professional. Each holding a black folder. Ava watched it all. Still silent. Still in control. It was the judge who now trembled. And then, as if the universe decided it wasn't done yet, Charles James turned to Ms. Elaine Trent, the store manager. You gave a sworn statement, he said, that you witnessed my daughter committing theft. Ms. Trent's voice faltered. I believed it was her. You believed? He asked. Or you assumed? Her face turned red. I didn't see her put it in. But I saw her with the bag. That's not a confession. That's not evidence, Charles replied. And you've just slandered a minor. In public. In front of witnesses. With permanent consequences. She looked toward the judge, but the bench was empty. She looked toward the clerk, but he turned away. She looked toward the crowd, but no one came to her defense. And Ava? She finally spoke. I saw you watching me. From the minute I walked in. You didn't look at anyone else. Just me. Like you were waiting for something. Miss Trent tried to respond. It wasn't like that. But Ava cut her off. No. It was exactly like that. The room quieted again. And then Charles stepped beside his daughter. Put a hand on her shoulder. Not to protect her, but to show the world that she didn't need protecting anymore. Because now she had a voice. And the whole system was finally listening. Inspector Young turned to the clerk. Begin documentation for release. All charges are to be dropped immediately. File an official record of wrongful detention. The clerk nodded fast, typing furiously. And one more thing, she said. Her gaze locked onto the courtroom camera in the corner. We'll be reviewing all of this courtroom's recent cases. If Judge McKinley did this to a cabinet member's child, imagine what she's done to kids without powerful families. That hit hard. A ripple of realization passed through everyone present. This wasn't just one case. It was a pattern. A rot. And it had just been exposed. Charles turned to Ava. You okay? She nodded. I am now. Let's go home. But before they could leave, a young boy, maybe 13, stood from the gallery. He wore a faded hoodie, sat next to his grandmother. He looked at Ava like she was more than a classmate. Like she was a symbol. He spoke softly. Thank you? Ava turned to him. What for? He swallowed. For not backing down. And just like that, the story became bigger than her. Bigger than her name. Bigger than her father's title. She hadn't just cleared her own name. She'd cracked something wide open. Something that had been hidden under robes and gavels and sealed case files. She had taken on a judge. And won. Not because she yelled. Not because she fought. But because she stood tall. When the world told her to stay small. 2 weeks later, the courtroom looked different. No more Judge McKinley. No more icy glares. No more whispered judgments in the corners of the gallery. Instead, there was light. Literally. The curtains had been pulled back. The room felt warmer. And this time, Ava walked in through the front door. Not in cuffs. Not in fear. But with purpose. She wore a navy blazer. Hair neatly tied. Eyes steady. Chin high. By her side was Charles James, not as the Attorney General, but simply as a proud father. Inspector Young was waiting. She gestured toward the podium at the front of the courtroom. You ready? She asked. Ava nodded. Then stepped forward. The room was packed. Not just with media, but with students, teachers, parents, and former defendants, kids who had once stood in that very same spot, under the judgment of someone who was no longer there. Ava looked at them all. Then took a deep breath. "My name is Ava James," she said. "And 2 weeks ago, I was accused of something I didn't do. I wasn't given a voice. I wasn't given a lawyer. I was judged, not by my actions, but by my appearance." Silence. But I stood up. Not just for myself, but for every kid who's been told to stay quiet. Every kid who didn't have a badge behind them. Or a father with a title. She paused. Looked at the front row. Ms. Trent was there, by court order, now facing her own civil suit. She didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just sat there, forced to listen. Judge McKinley, however, was not there. She had been formally removed from the bench pending a judicial ethics hearing. Her name, once feared, was now under national scrutiny. And her pattern of rulings? Unraveled. Over 40 past cases were reopened. 15 convictions overturned. 3 juveniles released from detention. The dominoes were falling. Ava continued. "I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to go home. To live like every other kid. But if being heard means standing here, then I'm going to keep standing." She stepped back. The room erupted into applause. Not just polite claps, but real, raw, cathartic cheers. Because justice didn't whisper that day. It roared. Outside the courthouse, microphones were waiting. "Ms. James, are you going to press charges?" one reporter asked. Charles answered. "We are pursuing every legal avenue. Not out of vengeance, but to ensure this never happens again." Ava didn't say much. She just looked out at the cameras, at the flashing lights, and said, "You can try to silence a voice. But you can't erase the truth." The reporter paused. "What's next for you?" Ava smiled. "I have finals next week." Laughter. But it wasn't the laugh of mockery, it was release. Relief. Because she was back to being a kid. A kid with a future. A name that now meant something powerful. Ava James. The girl who stood alone. Who made the courtroom listen. And forced the system to change. They thought she was just another number. Another girl to push through the system. But she reminded them, one voice can start an earthquake. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She just told the truth. And truth, no matter how small, always finds its way to the surface. Even in the darkest courtroom. What did you think of this story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.